I appreciate the Foo Fighters as the walk-up song, as the intro, the rejoin music. It's Matt Dubiel in for Alex Jones for the fourth hour. I am broadcasting from the WCKG studios here, literally on the front lines. Now, while I'm 20 minutes removed from the carnage that is Chicago, we are broadcasting from the AM 1530 WCKG studios, where we carry. Gosh, I'm so happy that Infowars has put out some other shows. Alex is great, but when you're a station manager and you run a radio station, you're looking for more stuff to go with it. So then you look at the other shows that are out there, and from 8 to 11, like the pickings are pretty slim. So you got like a Glenn Beck, and we tried that, and it was just like, man, I don't know where this guy's going with the soccer balls and Ted Cruz and what the heck he's doing. He wants to be, Deepak Chopra and Oprah, all the us. And so we bounced Glenn, and now we have David Knight on from 8 to 11 in the morning on FM 102.3 here and AM 1530. And then the War Room we have on from 4 to 6. So it is a wall-to-wall lineup of Infowars shows. And we need it here in Chicago. Why is Chicago important to you, even though you may not be in Chicago? Because Chicago is is sort of the litmus test for the rest of the country. If it happened in Detroit, and then if it happens in Chicago, it's coming to a theater near you. And so these are the things you need to watch out for. I want to talk briefly. I want to map out the history of men dressing as women in the mainstream media, because I think that it's important to dissect why this is now something that we all somehow accept as maybe just the way it is today. And so we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I do want to mention Michael Evans. Michael Evans, you may not have heard of Michael Evans. You probably will never hear about Michael Evans, except for right now and right here on Infowars. And the reason why is the Chicago death toll hit 562 people over the weekend. 562 people have been shot and killed in Chicago in 2017. And there have been 2 new reported deaths, and one man was gunned down last week, and he's been identified as 30-year-old Michael Evans. You're never going to hear, look at him. He's on the screen if you're watching at Infowars.com/show, Infowars.com/show. He's a black man, and he wasn't shot by a cop. So you're probably never going to hear about him. I will tell you, 14 people have now been shot and killed in the month of November in Chicago. It's Las Vegas in slow motion every month in Chicago. Las Vegas every month in slow motion. So it's not as sexy for the cameras. It's not as sexy for Crybaby Kimmel. It's not as sexy for the media. It's not as sexy for the New York Times. It's not as sexy for CNN. There's not a lot of meat there. So they're not going to talk about Michael Evans. God bless Michael Evans. The governor, who, by the way, so consider this. When you hear Alex Jones talking about the political system and the left-right paradigm, and how this information is above the left-right paradigm stuff, realize that the mayor of Chicago is a Democrat, the governor is a Republican, and there's more murders in Chicago than ever before. Over 3,700 people have been just shot, not killed, but just shot in a calendar year in Chicago. If we take a look, and why is that important to you if you're in Florida? Why is that important to you if you're in Texas, if you're in Nevada, if you're in Arkansas, if you're in New York, if you're outside America? This is coming to a theater near you. It's coming to your local town. It's being engineered all around you. It is a result of the world that we live in, the BS laws that are in place, the protections for the criminals, and the provisions against the good guys. It's indicative of the paralyzed police officers who they really can't do their jobs like they could have, because they'll get sued, or BLM will protest them, or the Reverend Jesse Jackson, jibbity jibbity, jibbity jibbity, and rat-a-tat-tat. Jesse Jackson will come on that doorstep. Or Al, I wanted to call him Al Roker, and then I almost wanted to call him Al Franken. Who's the other Al? What's the other guy's name? He does what Jesse Jackson does. He's the agitator. Al Sharpton, thank you. Not Al Franken. I mean, they're all in the same boat. I mean, Al Franken, Roker. What was the Al I need? Sharpton. And he's a reverend, right? I love it how they're just honorary reverends, like they got it on the internet or something. I know guys, and you don't have to be black to do this. You could be black, white, Hispanic, brown, yellow, whatever. You go on the internet and you could get your degree, so you could call yourself a doctor, and you could go and get your certificate so that you could say that you're a minister or a reverend or whatever it is, and then you can marry people. But the Reverend Al Sharpton, resist we much. He's nowhere to be seen. He's nowhere to be found. Him and Jesse Jackson Jr. Jibbity, they're nowhere to be found. There's 14 people shot and killed in Chicago, almost all of them black, and those guys are nowhere to be found. You know where they're at? They're in the they're on the Wi-Fi right now, and they're watching their Xfinity, or they're talking to Alexa. They're doing their high-profile rich guy thing because they make a lot of money off of the carnage that is the plight of not just the black man in Illinois and in Chicago and in America, but it's a income thing around the country. Governor Bruce Rauner, who's a Republican, Rauner, and his wife Diana are trying to make sure members of the military around the world receive holiday cards from people throughout Illinois. By the way, that's part of the news today. So poor Michael Evans, 30, shot and killed in Chicago. And what is Governor Rauner working on? Him and his wife are working on making sure that the military around the world receives holiday cards from people throughout Illinois. Now, a lot of my family has served. A lot of my family are veterans. I am not. I love all the veterans. My favorite, I posted this yesterday online, my favorite is my grandfather, who I'd never met. He didn't die in service, but he died after his service to our country. He's a veteran. Talked to my children about Veterans Day at the dinner table on Sunday, and was unfortunately not very shocked to find out that it was not discussed at school on Thursday or Friday. Veterans Day was not discussed in school. The governor's working on cards for the people in the service, but yet the school system isn't even talking about Veterans Day. And then we have people being shot in the streets, and the governors and the mayors aren't doing anything about it because they're working on making sure that people get cards in the mail. Talk to a veteran, talk to somebody who is active military. Ask them if they give a crap about getting a card in the mail. Ask them what they prefer, and you'll find out that they care more about what's happening in the United States. We're going to talk about how that's been dripped in, exactly how that agenda has been perpetrated through the media for men dressing as women, making it completely normal and diminishing the status of the veterans. Coming up on Infowars, in for Alex Jones from Chicago. It's Matt Dubiel from WC. It's Matt Dubiel filling in for Alex Jones, and I'm damn glad to be here from Chicago, from the front lines in Chicago, where the death toll in 2017 is 14 for the month. We have 14 killed and shot in Chicago, 562 for the whole year so far. And it really is the front lines in Chicago. It's a preview of what's coming to American cities around the country, Detroit, the South, the West, the East. It's a warning. It's a warning to you in wherever you are, that whether it's a Democratic mayor or a Republican mayor or a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, that they're not going to be focusing on the right things. They're going to inevitably be focusing on the wrong things, whatever those things are that gets them in front of the feel-good mainstream media that will write a story about them sending out cards to the veterans. The veterans don't need cards. You know what they need? They need better health care. They need not to be ignored when they get back to the United States of America. They need to not be held up as the scum of the country when they come back from serving us. They need to be put on a pedestal and aided in their transition from serving the country into adjusting to private life. That's what they need. They need to be treated like human beings deserve to be treated. The cards are a nice effort, and it's a feel good, and it gets a good headline, but it's not enough. Very important that you know this. There's some specials that are that have ended, okay, at InfoWarsStore.com. They've ended some specials, including 50% off all apparel and 50% off Super Male Vitality. All right, so because it was so big, they had to cut it off. They say it's for a limited time, and that's it. But here's what's available, and here's why it's important. When Keith Richards is suffering from exhaustion, when you hear about Britney Spears being taken to the hospital, and then they take her and she's exhausted, and we had to get her fluids and stuff. One of the fluids that they'll end up giving her, one of the vitamins they'll give her or him and others, is vitamin B12. I am a big believer in B12, and I've experienced it personally. I've gotten B12 injections, and they really help you. If you're taking enough vitamin D, especially in the winter months, you get your vitamin D up because you're not getting it from the sun. You get the B12 in, and before you know it, you're feeling like a human being and maybe even superhuman again. Secret 12 is the vitamin B that you can put under your tongue. They call it sublingual. So there's 50% off right now with free shipping at InfoWarsStore.com. So you might have heard Alex today talking about some I don't know if you can say tranny on Facebook. It sounds like men in drag and tranny was banned by Facebook. So let's just call it what it is: grown men dressing as women. And grown men dressing up as women, grown men pretending to be women, is something that is not new. It's been happening for hundreds and thousands of years. And it's just actually been normalized, though, over the last 40 to 50 years, and they've done it very systematically. And this is important to note. It doesn't mean that everybody who's participated in the movie or in the media is complicit in the sort of shift, the public consciousness shift. Doesn't mean that they all did it on purpose, because I'm going to mention some things and you're going to go, wait a minute, so-and-so is a good dude and that guy's not a bad guy. And I'm not saying that they're complicit in the architecture of it. But what happens is when it becomes popularized, then it's hijacked for their general mission. And I'm going to take you back to the beginning. Right? Now, imagine the 1950s and the 1960s. Imagine the world in the 1950s and the 1960s. Imagine the world of Ozzie and Harriet, because that's pretty much the world that we lived in. You had white-collar men who wore a suit and tie, and they wore a fedora hat, much like a Jimmy Stewart in many of the movies, especially, like It's a Wonderful Life. You had men that were white-collar, wearing suits and ties and hats, dressing like men. Then you had men that were blue collar, and the blue collar men, this is very cliche, but they might have had some scruff and they might have had a uniform on. And those men looked like men. And if you showed them a man dressed as a woman, they would immediately reject that. So what happened? In 1959, there was a movie that came out with Tony Curtis, and the movie was called Some Like It Hot. Now, this is before my time. I was born in the 70s, man. Some Like It Hot is a movie about a couple of guys dressing like women. Now, here's what they did, and here's how these ideas are transferred, okay? They don't just say that they're going to have them dress like men for fun. Now the story is, well, what if they had to dress like men? What if there was a reason for these men to dress like women? And the reason is that they witnessed a mob hit. So now they're changing, they're shifting the idea. They're saying men of America, masculine men of America, and women of America, and elderly of America, would it be okay if men dressed as women, as long as it was for a good reason, like in this story where they're fleeing the mafia? Two men witness a mob hit, they flee the mafia, and they flee in an all-female band. So they had to dress as women to disguise themselves as part of the all-female band. That was the ruse. It was for survival. Is it okay to dress like a woman if it's for survival? And most rational men and women would say, well, okay, I suppose that if you're dressing like a woman to survive, it would be okay to dress like a woman. It would not be okay to dress like a woman for fun. It would not be okay to dress like a woman if you're teaching class, or if you're working your day job at the ad agency, or if you're working on Wall Street, or if you're working in the union stockyards, or if you're installing electricity. You can't dress like a woman there, not for fun. But if you watch Some Like It Hot, the message is that it's okay to dress like women if you're a man, if it's for survival. And so they let that idea sort of simmer, and that idea kind of just sat there, and people watched the movie. Fast forward to 1982. 1982, a movie came out with Dustin Hoffman, The Graduate. And by the way, it is never a coincidence that the men that dress up as the women in the movies are some of the most masculine and revered men, playing some of the most masculine roles ever played. Now, Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate played a young man who bedded an older woman, which was a fantasy of many young men. Who, as a young man in that time, wouldn't have loved to have an older, attractive woman be interested in them? And now, in 1982, that same young man, who in 1967 was everybody's fan, they wanted to be him in 1967. Now, in 1982, Dustin Hoffman is playing Tootsie, a man that dresses like a woman, but not for fun. He's not doing it for fun. This is an important distinction. It's not a pleasurable experience. That is too weird for mainstream America. They're escalating you, okay? So first, Tony Curtis, a very masculine man with a very square jaw, revered by men and women. Tony Curtis dresses as a woman, along with, is that Jack? I think it's Jack Lemmon. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, for crying out loud, are dressing like women. And it's okay, because in the movie, their characters are dressing like women. Why? To escape the mob. So it's for survival. It's cool. Survival is cool. It's cool. Dressing like a woman is cool if you're trying to survive. B, secondly, in the movie Tootsie, why is Dustin Hoffman dressing like a woman? He's dressing like a woman, again, for survival. He can't get a job. He cannot get a job. He can't get hired. They're cutting back. You got to be a woman to work. I think he was in the newsroom. And in order for him to he's an unsuccessful actor in the movie. And in order for him to get work, he has to dress like a woman. My friend, it does not stop there. It does not stop there. This is just the beginning. I'm going to take you all the way through it. And you're going to see, yep, look at the screen, Infowars.com/show. You can kind of get an idea of where we're going with this stuff. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Dave Chappelle witnessed it firsthand. Others have talked about it. You're going to realize that it's everywhere. It's been surrounding you now for better than 2 or 3 or 4 decades. You're completely surrounded. We're going to completely dismantle it coming up next in the 4th hour for Alex Jones from Chicago.
Thousands of years ago, there was a basic form of chivalry. Our ancestors would hear the drums of war, giving the warriors of the tribe a chance to organize and prepare a defense. 60 years ago, when foreign air forces were approaching filled with bombs, they had drums of their own, air raid sirens. But in the 21st century, there are silent weapons for quiet war. Pathogens added to the food and water, and to the lining of plastics that destroy our vitality, turn off our hormones, and accelerate our journey towards death. I personally counter this onslaught with Anthroplex. Anthroplex is designed with known organic concentrated herbs to create the basic foundation to normal metabolic activity inside the human body. Discover why Anthroplex is turning so many heads today. It's time for us to take our bodies back into our own hands, and it starts at InfoWarsLife.com with Anthroplex.